We are raw and real Western women who have endured the fires of life, and though we carry the brands of our trials,
we are learning how to satisfy our thirst with the well water that comes from the only one that can truly satisfy, Jesus.
Journey with us as we explore an unlimited range of topics. We will discuss our personal experiences,
the good, the bad, and the ugly, along our beautiful journeys to the well, and so much more.
Water up! Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a super special topic for you this evening that's near and dear to all of our hearts. It's a big part of our journey that we've all been on together for over 2 years now, and part of the root of what brought us together. And it is something that was brought to Katie. She was called to do something by the Lord, and it's been a journey, and not just for her, but for all of us. And it roots in a question that is found in the beginning of the book that she wrote, Spilled Coffee, Marriage, and White Sheets. And the question is, why is it when something is spilled onto our marriage with the potential to stain it, that the offender is not stripped down right then and quickly put through the wash process? So we are going to answer this question for you from each of our own perspectives, and Katie's also going to share a little bit about her journey, what drove her to write the book, and what it means to her.
So in writing this book, it was initially for our Bible study group. It wasn't even a we thing. I was discouraged because our first night of Bible study didn't go the way I wanted it to. And so it was clearly a me thing. And as I was talking it out with the Lord, he basically just told me, he was like, obviously this is not about you. You need to take a step back. And he was like, I got this handled. So the next morning, I'm sitting there with my coffee and in my quiet time, and Misty actually had sent me a video. And it was by Stephen Furtick, and it was, What is Hurting Your Relationship? So, I'm all excited, and I'm, sitting down, getting ready to do this, and listen. And I'm very particular about my sheets. I'm just one of those weird texture people. And this is my first pair of sheets that, are costly to me. Not Walmart sheets. They were Target sheets. And so, and they're white, And so I was sitting there, and I kid you not, it was my hand just, dumped my coffee. And I was just like, what? And I immediately went into, all kinds of, craziness and whatnot, and God immediately stopped me right there, and he was like, why is it when things are spilt on your marriage that they are not cleaned up right then and there and not left for potential to stain? And I was like, I don't know, that's a really good question. And that's how it originated. So it was basically just a paper that I had written for the Bible study, and we had actually joked for a little while about it being a book, and I was just like, I am not an author. I've never once ever thought of myself of writing a book, but obviously God works in mysterious ways, and here we are, and we wrote a book, and it was published, and it is basically the root of what we go over. So it's something that's very dear to me because it talks about personal experiences in my marriage and how I was tearing it apart. Initially you like to point fingers at the other because it's easier for you to do that to them than it is to self-reflect, and Jesus guided self-reflection. And so it was basically how I was tearing my marriage apart and not knowing it, and how God walked me through it and explaining to me what I was doing and then showing me how to correct it. So that's originally where it came from, and it just turned out to be a big blessing to me through the journey that Jesus has had me on, because it's something that I would have never pictured myself doing, and really it was God. I can only remember a portion of what the book says, so I know for a fact that it was him writing it and not me.
So. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And something I want to add to that too is this is a journey that he took you on, yes, that also it influenced all of us. So it's something that's tangible. It is within your reach. It's not unrealistic. It's not unattainable. It's real. It's something that everybody in every marriage and every home can grasp and utilize and put to work. It's something that everyone can utilize.
It is. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the biggest things is it's when it says Jesus guided self-reflection, like, you can sit out and look at yourself and not see anything wrong with you. But when God and Jesus are in control and he's the one that's showing you, it opens a whole new door to things. Like, I was going to church every Sunday. Every time the doors were open, I was there. I was doing my 10%, was doing all the things that the Bible called me to do. But I was doing it with an ungrateful heart and resentment towards my husband because he didn't go to church with me. He wasn't doing the godly walk that I wanted him to. Never would I sit there and, see God working through him because I was too worried about the things that he was doing wrong. And I wanted to pinpoint. Let me tell you something. I was getting up every morning, sitting in my closet, praying to God. I was demanding change. Like, I wanted change in him. Never once did I look at myself. But I was demanding change in him, and nothing happened for 2 solid years. Nothing happened. And I got upset with God, and I was just like, I dedicate myself to you. I sit here and I pray and pray and pray, and nothing happened. And God was like, you're going to be the one changing. Let me lay down these things about you. You've laid down all this about him. Now let me show you what you've done. And it by far surpassed everything that I laid down about him. And, it crushed me. And, it's just been a journey, like you said, of learning how to self-reflect through Jesus and not through the fleshly view. Mm-hmm. So,
and that's a good perspective because I didn't realize the self-reflection until I could truly forgive him, which then allowed me to be free to look at myself. And so for some reason, not fully forgiving somebody can put on blinders to, well, we actually need to change about ourselves. You just have to let it go and then work on that mending and healing portion.
Yep.
That's right. And when it comes to this question, why is it that we don't immediately address the offender? Why is it that we don't immediately address what's staining in that moment, whatever it might be? For me, a lot of the time when something happens in our home or in our family, and I'm not sure what drives it or where it's rooted, but it's like, I just want to be angry for a minute. Mm-hmm. I just want to be mad for a minute. I'm in it and I feel it and I'm about to own it and I just want to be there for a minute. And I don't like the way that makes me feel, but it's almost like you can't dig yourself out of the hole, fast enough, or don't have the strength to, especially on your own. But it's something that I now recognize about myself and have been working on addressing. Again, addressing myself, just like you had to address yourself, because for me it's an anger thing. I want to be angry about whatever it is that's staining in that moment instead of handling it properly.
And that anger is a big thing for me. It's one of my most hardest emotions to contain, and it's easier for me to contain it to a complete stranger than it is to contain it in my home. And me and you were talking about that yesterday. Mm-hmm. It is an absolute war zone in my home. But any stranger can be ugly to me out in the open, and I can take it and blow it off and just be as godly as you want me to be to them. But when it occurs in my home, the problem is that's the person that I love, that knows me back and forward, knows me. And in my mind, I think, well, why would you do that to hurt me? If you loved me, then you wouldn't have said that about me, or you wouldn't have said that to me. It's different because that's your person. So it hurts you in a different way. Mm-hmm. And so, you lash out differently because it truly hurts you. Whereas a stranger, it's just a stranger. Mm-hmm. They don't really know you. They just, whatever, you can blow it off. But when it's somebody that you truly love, it hits different. And then it's like, ding, 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 game on, you want to hurt me, let me, I've been bottling this up, and the book talks about that, about how I used to shove it in this little bag and just wait for him to say something because I was fixing to use it, I was fixing to get him, and I called it my little bag of ammo, and I was just could not wait, just be bring it on, sucker, and then God's you can't do that no more. And I'm but those were really good, and they were.
I just want to use it one time.
Yeah. No, and you can't, and it's harder whenever the person you love hurts you, and then you have to forgive them. Well, it's just in your face. The stranger, out in the open, it's not in your face, you kind of bygone, or if it was through text or whatever, like it's not immediately in your face, but that is your home and it's just there, and so you have to deal with it. And so, and when the other side is not looking at it through a godly perspective, and you are, like, that's that division line there with the good fighting the evil, and you're trying to set that example, but they know exactly what to do to provoke you, and it's just like, I done told you once, you're provoking me. You know, and then come second time, you're like, I done told you twice, you're provoking me. And then 3 times, it's like, I'm fixing to grab this chair and sling it at you. You know, like it just hits different when it's in your home. And that's the ultimate playground for Satan anyways, especially in a marriage, is what can I do?
Yep.
For sure.
With your thoughts, with your emotions, you know, what can I do? You know, he's not listening. Yeah, his walk may not be as strong as mine, so let me use that against you. You know, it's the ultimate battlefield.
The devil always puts blame on that other person, or puts a magnifying glass on them so you can see what they're doing wrong and nitpick them and just constantly be aggravated by them whenever they're not doing anything wrong or anything different. But he wants to put that magnifying glass so it can negative impact you and your family.
Yeah.
I can create a scenario in my head. Like if we get in a heated argument, like it can be about something, but like when I'm off by myself, like I can already create a scenario that hasn't even happened, but like I want it to foresee, like want it to happen, and then like I play on it and then I repeat it, and like that a long time ago was pointed out to me, like that is a sin. Like you can't do that. Like you've got to get out of that, but you constantly repeat it of what you would have said or what you're gonna say when that deal arises, and then you just sit there and you just obsess over it. Like I have an issue with that, so like I have to like immediately like wipe it clean and be like, you know, whatever. So it's just a struggle, and like I guess Satan knows that about me because he uses it a lot to create something like that, and just makes me look on past things that happened forever ago, and then it's like those are brought into the forefront too. Well, this is not the first occurrence of this, you remember this, and then you pull it in, and it's like you immediately have to just be like, you know, I'm not doing this.
And that's the difference in letting that stain sit versus immediately washing it out and getting rid of it. Because if we don't immediately get rid of it, then we do have that little bit of a residue that reminds us of that stain. And let me bring that back up. You know, it's just like if you have a stain on a carpet, you can wash it and wash it and wash it, but eventually over time it seeps back up to the top. Where in a sheet, you can tend to get through every single fiber, but if you allow it to get deep enough, it will stick.
And like the funny thing about the coffee is like it was funny because Satan tried to use something that I enjoy, and that's my time with God in the mornings. It's like he tried to use something to make it, you know, just mess everything up. So like he uses the things that you love the most against you. And like even though coffee's not a big thing, but I like my coffee. Like there's a lot of people that just love coffee, and that's just one of those things that I do, but I tie that in with my quiet time. It's just something that me and the Lord do in the mornings is coffee, and we sit down and I pray, and you know, I dig into the word and stuff like that. But it's just funny how he uses those things and then like just makes you sit there and I don't know, focus on them.
Yeah.
And as far as like the staining and stuff and not fixing it or, you know, removing it right when it does, a lot of my problem is I'm hard-headed, and once I'm pushed to that point, I don't want to fix it. Like it's hurt my feelings, and it's like, you know, it's hard to come back from that. And that's something that I still struggle with now, even with writing the book and it being revealed to me. That's something that I have to keep inward, and it like when I keep my anger inward, it makes me sick. So like for the next few days, like I will not feel good, or I will be sick because I have just engulfed that anger instead of lashing it out like I normally would. I just internalize it, and I work through it by praying to God and asking him to show me where I was wrong so I can fix it, and if I need to apologize, and it's things like that. And we all know how hard it is to apologize if you said things that you shouldn't have. So I try to be quick about I'll just immediately shut down so I don't say something that I regret later. Because the other may not have learned yet to not put that in a little bag. of ammo. Like they still might be piling that up, and then later they throw it back at you, and it's like, okay, listen, you can't do that. Like that was my tactic, and you know you can't do that.
I know how that game works.
Yeah, I know how that
Yeah.
game works. You can't do that. But like even like with me and Keegan, like that's a struggle for both of us, because his initial thing, when you hurt his feelings, he's coming back with something and he's going to hurt your feelings, if not twice as bad. That's just how anger works for him. So it's better to just stop it right then and there and let each other cool down, and then come back and process through.
Yes. And that's something too, I think, like we've talked about anger and emotion driving, why don't we strip it down right away? And for so many people, I believe it does, but for some, I think it's a lazy tactic too, because it is a journey and it is a process. When God teaches you and shows you, this is what you need to address, this is what's going on with you, and this is what you need to fix in yourself, so that I can work on your marriage. Well, that's a process, and it takes work, just like putting forth action in any area of your godly walk. It takes work, and laziness, I think, is a big thing for some, and they don't want to put in the effort.
And then asking God to self-reflect, help them self-reflect. If you're not out of your selfishness in general, you're not going to ask Jesus to help you self-reflect. Right. Like, your eyes haven't been unveiled to the things that you're doing wrong. And like, for instance, there's some things that Keegan may do that I know because God has showed me that it's wrong. But to him, it's not wrong yet. Like, it hasn't been shown to him, like God has not shown him, hey, that's wrong, you shouldn't do that. To him, he's just fine. But in my mind, I want to point, you see that right there? Like, you can't be doing that. But they don't perceive it that way. Then it's a judgmental thing, or who are you to tell me? And it's not their fault. You have to intercede for them in prayer until the veil is lifted.
Well, you said something to me yesterday that was a really good point. And like, a lot of times when you're in those situations where you are fighting with your spouse and you're in the heat of anger, you ain't looking at yourself and what you've done wrong, even though they're turning around and doing the same thing to you that you would have done to them. Like, you're just working against each other, and it's just a constant battle. Whereas if you said yesterday, like, we got to treat them kind of like they're our children. Like, Paul was talking to the church at, I think it was Corinthians, and he was like, y'all are like my children. This is why I'm working so hard with y'all. Like, this is why I'm writing letters to rebuke y'all, so that way you will learn how to grow from it. And like he wrote letters to the Corinthians to, correct this behavior or whatever. And then but it was like they kind of got guilty from it in one part of it, like 1 Corinthians. And then after that, they had a good repentance from it, but he was also wrote back a letter after that to be like, hey, I wasn't saying this because, I was angry with y'all, or because like, he was like, this is out of love. Like, I think we always forget in the heat of the moment, like, we love that person over there, and they're just doing the same thing that we would do. And it's hard to turn around and look at yourself about that, especially when you're dealing with somebody who, or like, for say, instance, a couple years down the road after God has revealed a few things about you, like, and then they're over there still doing the same thing. But I mean, that's part of what happens when you marry somebody, and like, you weren't both walking together to church and all this stuff beforehand. Like, once you marry that person, you've got to deal with it's part of the world and part of the fleshly. Like, whenever you first get into it, it's not about, like, if you got married before you go to church and all this stuff, like, it's not about becoming one, and like, you didn't have that good foundation. You weren't able to pray to God before. Yep. Like, it's you've got some ground to make up, and if just one person changes, you're going to be unequally yoked. And you may have to slow down a little bit until the other person catches up. Like, you may have to cool it just a little bit. But it's also hard to remember in those heated moments of anger that, hey, I love this person and I need to set an example for them. versus, just rushing on ahead and being, you can't like run off and leave them behind. You've got to kind of set an example for them also.
It's like whenever you're talking about like being a mom. It's not like you're mothering them, but it's like you have to look at it as you look at your children, how you would react to a rebellious child, or how you would react to a child that that you've raised in church, you've raised them properly, or how God, according to what God has wanted you to, and then they go out on their own and they start making decisions that are not what they taught at home. They're their own being, they have their own free will, stuff like that. It's when they start doing that, and it pains your heart to see them making those mistakes when they know better, when they've been taught better. So it's like, initially, your husband, for instance, Keegan was raised in the church. He was, like, he knows about God, he stayed in it, he knows. Okay, went out on his own, like us all. We get off on the wrong path and stuff like that. But it's supposed to pain your heart as if it was your child enough that it will help you repent, intercede in prayer for them until God has lifted the veil off their eyes, until they're ready to self-reflect, until they're ready. So you intercede in prayer for them because it pains your heart that, man, I used to be like that and God helped me. Like, you can't judge them on that. You just try to intercede in prayer for them and ask forgiveness, just like Jesus did on the cross for us. All them people was sitting there spitting on him and doing all those things, and his last words, were forgive them because they do not know. The same thing with your spouse or whoever it may be. Forgive them because they just don't know yet. They're just lost a little bit, but they're going to come, but you have to intercede in prayer for them.
Yeah. And like in our situation, it's kind of a middle of the road situation, right? So like Joel, he takes us to church. We go to church, he has a relationship with the Lord, but we still run into things where we disagree, or where he acts differently than I would, or than I believe that he should. And I still, will get angry or try to say, no, I think you should have handled it like this, or, well, I don't want you to do that, and he doesn't understand why. Well, you can only talk so much until, like you're saying, you have to allow the Lord to intercede. We had a situation just over the last couple weeks, something that we've been dealing with at home, that I have talked and talked and talked. And it's something that bothers me deeply, and he doesn't understand why. It doesn't make sense to him. It's not unveiled yet. And the Lord revealed to me last week that it's time to be quiet, and that it's time to pray and let him intercede and let him handle it, instead of me trying to talk and me trying to handle it. And that came out of conversations that we've had, learning to start to self-reflect. Because I do believe that it's a learned process. I don't believe that it's something that just comes naturally. I think that it's learned, and it's something like, I feel like I'm just at the first footsteps of the journey of it. And it's really cool, because when God starts revealing things to you about how to address, the stains, it's neat. It's a really beautiful journey, but yeah, our situation is kind of in the middle there, where, yeah, he goes to church, but we still have disagreements, and we still have things that have to be reflected upon and, washed away. Are you finding that you need more fuel throughout the week? Check out these other Jesus-driven podcasts. The Get Right Christian Podcast, hosted by Jess Bishop, Jay Barnes, and Justin Brent. And Unshakable with Charlena Kelly, brought to you by Speak Truth Media. Charlena has been a wonderful influencer of ours, and we highly recommend listening to her program.
I think the immediate, I don't want to get off as this, you have to, mother your husband. That's not what I'm getting at all. That was, an example, so I don't want our listeners to think it like that. But you have to use it as, the love that you have for your child. Initially when you see them messing up, you scold them, whatever, but you want to hold them and you want to love them. You want to love them through it. I'm sorry, but my initial thought when my husband makes me mad is not to love him through it. It's more like, I'm fixing to throat punch you,
Yes.
whatever. But like, you have to love them as Jesus loves us. His own disciples turned against him, wasn't even there for him. But it's like he still loved them and still asked for forgiveness and all of that for them. Never once did he say a cross word to them. Never once was he ugly to them. And it's like, I understand that example is very hard to follow. But it's like, it's been set. And when stains like this occur, you're supposed to love like Jesus. And that is easier said than done. Lord, it's easier said than done. But it's like, that's your initial first step, is to stop and look at it as, okay, where is this rooted from? Why are we upset? Like, what has caused this? That's immediately where I start. If something gets crossways, it's like, okay, have I hurt his feelings some way or somehow? Have I said something? Have I embarrassed him? What is it that has made him generate such anger towards me? And if I can't really figure it out and it's just something that's just off the wall, like, I kind of try to categorize it in my head. Okay, it's nothing that I've done. Has somebody else done something to him, and now he's just taking it out on me? So I like try to think of it from different perspectives before I blow up. And like, I'll let it keep going, and I'll let the sly comments keep going, and I'll let them keep coming, and then like till my belly gets full, and then I'm just like, if you have something you need to say to me, say it. Like, I don't need the little comments coming back or the little nitpicks. Like, if you got something to say, say it. And then it just like, it builds from there. And then you try to initially get them to tell you, like, what the problem is. And if it is me, what have I done? What can I do to make that better? So you try to self-reflect in the midst of the argument. If there's just no way out of it and you're both angry, you might as well just stop right then and there. And just be like, we're not done, but we both need to cool off. Like, that's an adult move there.
It is.
We're not going to go to bed mad. We're going to just take some time apart. We're going to think a little bit before our feelings get too hurt and things just go too far. And like, that was a learned thing for me and him. And like, we don't do it all the time. We mess up sometimes and, have immediate blow ups and hurt each other's feelings. And it might take us a couple of days. But we normally try not to let it get that far. Whether it's me giving into him or him giving into me, like, there's got to be give there. Somebody initially has to give in and start the stain removal process. Like, you love that person. You're going to live the rest of your life with that person. Like, it's time to be adults. Let's, do this. If I've hurt your feelings, I'm sorry. If you need to say what you need to say, let me say what you need to say. Get your feelings out there. Communicate.
And that's like, I've experienced a lot of the opposite side of that, like, because for the longest time, I wouldn't talk about it. And that was something that, needed to happen. So I would, bottle it all up, and then I would get mad and explode, and we would get nowhere. Like, I wouldn't get to the point of, I wouldn't even know the point of why we were fighting. You know what I mean? Like, you would just be so frustrated. But I bottled up so much, and then becoming a nurse also, like, I didn't talk about work a lot. And now I've had to deal with my heart being so hard. And like, emotionless is not a thing you want. It's not something you want to get to or go to, but that's where we're at, so it's a whole different kind of process that, you don't really see it coming, but we're almost there now, so now it's like you got to chip away at the rock, and God's got to chip away at those little pieces to soften you again, because you're supposed to be moldable in his hands. And that's a couple years ago when we started the whole Bible study, I didn't realize where I was at, but I was hard as a rock, emotionless, like, until I exploded. And then it was just, knock down, drag out fights. But, like, I'd argue till I was out of breath. Whew. But, it's something that has been pointed out to me. And so, like, it is a good thing to, step back and say, hey, I'm really having this emotion right now. I need to step back and we can discuss it later. But you really need to make sure that you go back and have a good discussion about it. Like, communication is definitely a huge part of it, because if you don't, you don't want to get to where you just don't feel, or where you're emotionless. Like, and that's a hard place to be, especially being a nurse, because you see so many things, and like there's no help for that. There's not a lot of resources out there for nurses to just go, talk. Like, yes, everybody says there's counselors and therapy and all this stuff, but like truly helping you in the daily life, and having to go to work every day and seeing that, and then having to come home and be all these other things whenever you don't have if you don't have a spouse that understands that dealing with people all day is hard, and so if they've had a bad day too, like, your understanding and your compassion and all that's pretty much dried up by the time you get home sometimes. And it's real hard to love like Jesus whenever you get home sometimes. But it's something that you've got to try to put first throughout your whole day. But if you let it get too hard, I mean, it's not a good thing either. So having to be re-softened is a whole different ballgame that I never would have thought would have been a problem,
I get that. With the hardness, there's resentment,
Mm-hmm.
because nothing comes out. Like, if it's not being talked about, it's bottled up, and
Right.
that hardness is hatred, resentment, unhappiness. It's
Like
just
that
like
stain.
that stain that just
that's what
keeps-
happens when you let it sit.
and get
Mm-hmm.
it darker and darker, and then whatever, you try to, okay, well, I'll just let a little bit out here this time. It's like applying a generic version of the shout, like,
Yes.
and you just squirt it just a little bit, you just missed it, and I'll be like, oh, that'll do for now, but it's not,
Yeah.
because it literally gets ingrained in you, and then it's poured into your kids, and then your kids see you, how you handled those things. And like, my kids have seen me and my husband fight, but they've also seen us make up too. They've never
Mhm.
not seen us make up, and they've
Yeah.
seen some pretty rough things, but it's like they've always seen us come back, and they've always seen us apologize. Even if he didn't apologize to me, he's seen one of us. They've seen one of
Mhm.
us. So it's like, you have to make that effort too, because you're paving the road for your children as well.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you teach them to bottle that up, and you teach them to go ahead and keep in those little comments, because it'll reflect between one parent and another. Either the child will lose respect for the dad or the mom. Like, it reflects. And I only say that because I've seen it in my home.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen my kids side with me and reflect differently towards Keegan on some things. And it's not right. And like, I'll have to correct them, and then I'll have to correct myself too, because these are things that are learned.
Yes.
You are teaching your children these things, and it's like, what are you teaching them? Are you going to teach them to be toxic, or are you going to teach them to be compassionate human beings who understand that everybody has emotions and people use them differently? And how they're going to do that? Like, it's a legit thing. Like, I grew up in a separated home. There was emotions everywhere, and it's like, as a kid, you kind of just bottle those up. Like, I don't really know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do with it.
Well, like, as a kid, I mean, you don't think about the things you do. You see it, so from your parents or whatever, so you learn to do it. And like, I know as an adult, like, I learned a lot of things from my parents that I didn't realize were a problem until I was old enough to self-reflect. Like, but until you're like 20 or older, like, you don't think it's a problem. You just think, oh, I saw that, it worked, it's fine.
Yeah.
No big deal. Move on. But once you learn a habit, it's hard to break a habit.
Yeah. Oh, it's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I guess looking at it like coming from a divided home multiple times on both sides, it's like, I never wanted that for myself or for my children. Not that it was ever bad, like, as far as like going from mom's home to dad's home, like, there was never issues there. Like, if it was mom's time and we wanted to go to dad's, like, mom was always good about, like, y'all can go to your dad's. Like, it was very versatile.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, the emotions, you play on the emotions of both. And like you have to deal with those as kids, and then learning how to process them yourself and like living that life. I've never wanted it for myself. I've always wanted I want my kids to live in a solid home, and I want them to understand what that's like and not have to be divided, because in times like these, it's easy. And sometimes, like, I'm not taking up just like, if you got a divorce, this is this for you. Like, I understand that there's times when it just needs to be done, like for protection, or if things just aren't going right, unfaithfulness, like, I get it. But it's like, if it's just because you can't get along, it's a self-reflection problem. And like you were talking about the getting married, and not being equally yoked. I'm not going to lie to y'all. When I got married, the thought of my husband knowing Jesus never crossed my mind. Never crossed my mind. I knew he was a good person, I mean, at that age, like, I wasn't even worried about going to church. I was more worried about partying and things like that. Never once did Jesus ever cross my mind. And then it's like you pray, you like want your marriage to be blessed. Well, you didn't even ask Jesus to bless it in the beginning anyway. Right. So then it's like you're in it, and then you're asking him to bless something that you didn't even involve him in the first place. And so, like, that's something you kind of have to think about too. Not that my husband is bad by any means. He does believe in Jesus and never gives me issues about going to church. He just doesn't go with me. And that's just one way for Satan to use that against him and me.
But he's back where, you were whenever y'all first started. Like, he's still in the fleshly world. Like, that's where everybody's at. I mean, it takes a little bit more, I think, with marriages like that to strip it back. And, like you said, it happens for one person normally faster than another.
The more willing vessel, I guess, And it's like you have to... I was in such a place at that time where really it was just me and Kendon. He worked at the rig, so it was like he was gone 14 days and then home 14 days. Well, it's like in those 14 days of him being gone and my Jesus-filled little self, like I just got in my, my routine. And then it's like he come home and I was just like...
He messed up your routine.
What is this? And then like that's where it all began. Like he would bring things home like from the rig, and then like it would be brought to my attention, or I would find it and I'm like immediately hurt my feelings. And then it's like, Bible says you can't be doing this. You basically become a Bible thumper. And so it's like, then what do you do with that? And that's where it originated for me, is that's what I was doing, was judging him. We have no place to judge anybody.
Who are you to judge? Yeah.
If you have no sin, please cast the first stone. And that's exactly what I was doing. But I didn't see that until God was like, let me tell you what you're doing here. Everything that you're laying down about him, I'm going to lay down a few things about you.
Right.
And like, as somebody who was going to church, like I did not see that. But now that it was revealed, like I tried to reflect on it.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I feel like we struggle with as Christians, or like the big stereotype, like hypocrites and go to church or whatever. But like, it's something that you've got to remember. You were that sinner, but you've also got to make Jesus made his example. His example was attractive because it was accepting of everybody. It was not judgmental. You need to do this, and this, and this. Like, you need to get this. The Bible says this. Like, it was more of a, and I feel like that's where we struggle a lot as Christians, is making. We struggle with the emotions and everything, just like the flesh, but we put those expectations on sinners who are not at the point that we're at. Right. And we can't expect that out of them. We just need to show them the love out of it.
It definitely starts in our homes. Like, we need to start that in our homes.
Yep. There's more so than anywhere else. You have to be able to master, I guess, if you will, that in your home before you can ever take it out in public, essentially. And it's something that you can always work on and always grow in. It's an area that's ever changing, ever blossoming, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
So with that being said, don't let stains be on your marriage and not taking the time to communicate about them and taking the time to work through them. Because if they're not taken care of, they're initially going to be irremovable, and then it'll end up in separation and things like that. You have to communicate and work through them, and like it makes you love each other more. Because if you can communicate and talk about it and work through the hard things, like just be like the different, roasts of coffee. As you find out when you read the book. So
Yes. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube and can see, or here in front of Jill, this is what the cover looks like. It is available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and you can find it on our website. It's www.rw.org. But Amazon, Barnes & Noble,
and Walmart.
That's right. Yes. So available everywhere.
Yeah.
And a super good read.
And it's easy, and it's not real wordy, and it's got some humor in it. So I mean,
it's like you're listening to Katie talk. It's the best thing ever. Shall we close in a word of prayer?
Yes.
Okay. Lord, thank you so much for this wonderful time that we've gotten to spend together tonight, for the word that we have been able to bring, for the journey that each of us has been on through this book, through our group, through the people that we have met in the midst of all of it. We thank you so much for our journeys, from the beauty that comes from them and the lessons that we've learned. We ask that our journeys will influence our listeners, and that hopefully they can take away good bits and pieces that will help themselves in their own marriages and in their own homes. We just want to be able to spread your word, and we're so very grateful for each other and for all that you've done for each of us, Lord. We ask that you bless each and every one of our homes, our families, that you continue to guide us, that you continue to teach us and grow us in your name and in your word. In Jesus' name, amen.